care of yourself during medical school, whether that be just your general well-being, your mental health, your nutrition, or just your finances. So I'd like to introduce the amazing Amy, a third year from the University of Exeter, and she's going to be telling you about taking care of your mental health during university.
So, hello everyone, and my name is Amy Stokes. I am a third year medic from Exeter University, and today I'm going to be talking about taking care of yourself in the first year of medicine. I'm also doing this presentation with Emily Woodcraft and Nuria Horner, who are both third year medical students at Exeter too, and we're all part of the Committee of Wellbeing in Medicine Society in Exeter University. So, part one, I'm going to be talking about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is a severe feeling of inadequacy and self-doubt in your surroundings. And it's the perception that you haven't really earned your own accomplishments and that you don't belong in the position you are. Personally, I've experienced these feelings, especially in year one, as you're going into a completely different environment where you're surrounded by high-achieving academic individuals like yourself, and this can be very different from perhaps your college experiences or experiences of secondary school. So a bit more about imposter syndrome. So despite its name, it's not actually indicated as a psychological disorder, and it can actually just be referred to as imposter phenomenon. It's easy to feel like you're being ungrateful for your position because of this self-doubt, but it is an innate fear. So it means that this is a physiological response, which means that you're not actually at fault for these feelings. So don't worry if you do feel ungrateful, if you're having some self-doubt. And it also means that it doesn't improve with a greater amount of achievements. So by overworking yourself to perhaps overcome these feelings, you're not actually doing your well-being any good. And even Albert Einstein is thought to have experienced this syndrome. So it just goes to show that it can affect anybody. And it can range in severity. So like I said at the beginning, I've experienced some of these feelings. I wouldn't say they impacted me majorly compared to other people, but it's just nice to be aware that they can happen and you may be experiencing them. So who does it affect specifically? It's mainly high achieving students or anyone who is high achieving, which is why medical students are at such a great risk of this syndrome. And the first year of medicine, it can be really tough. Like I said, you're coming from a different environment and you're having to get used to a different course and university life at the same time. So you've transitioned from this high achieving background into likewise individuals. So it is quite difficult. And therefore it's easy to look at your peers and think, do I actually belong in this community here? And the answer is yes, you do belong here. That's why the medical school has chosen you to come here. They chose you for specific reasons, so don't necessarily focus on these feelings too much. It's just an achievement in itself to be in medical school, so don't focus too much on the people surrounding you, just focus on yourself more. It also appears to affect women more than men. This may be linked to perhaps women having more issues with worry and fear compared to men. And what was interesting is it may be more apparent in misrepresented groups, for example, BAME groups or in disabilities. And this is linked to the feeling of having a minority status, which might sort of cause this innate self-doubt around you, and you start to compare yourself to people, to your peers perhaps. So competition and imposter syndrome. From the get-go, medicine is a very competitive course. It's very based on teamwork as well, competing with each other in sort of an indirect way. So just think about the lengthy process you've had to endure just to get into medical school. You've had interview processes, you've had GCSEs and A-levels. Those are all very competitive processes that you've had to use. And despite medicine it is a very teamwork based environment, you're taught from the start to make sure that you are working as a team rather than individually. So it is quite a contradiction, the fact that you're competing with each other as well. But for example, your academic results, they may affect whether you can intercalate, and even your AMKs, your scores are based on calculations of averages in the whole year. So there's always going to be fellow students around you who fail, and then obviously dictate what your score is going to be. And it's this whole culture of competition that can lead to feelings of imposter syndrome, and then they can lead to feelings of self-doubt. So it is something to be aware of. But all you can do is try your absolute best, and that is the most that anyone will ask you to do. A lot of medical schools are actually quite lenient and are accepting. As long as you're trying and working hard, they understand that, and they do try to give you as much opportunity as you can to recover from any perhaps grades that you haven't quite met. So it is just about working as hard as you can, but you have to ensure that your well-being isn't affected. So what you need to do really is find a nice balance between well-being and working hard. And this can be quite hard in the first year, especially for me. I found it quite difficult. I always felt like I wasn't working hard enough, and that in turn actually had an effect on my well-being. So it's not always as much work as you can. It needs to be balanced with, I need to take time out for myself. So what can imposter syndrome lead to? These are quite extreme examples, but it's just nice to be able to show how it can be linked with other ideas. So psychological stress, emotional suffering, mental health disorders like anxiety and depression, drug abuse, and sabotaging your own career. So it is important to highlight these issues and be able to identify them in yourself, or maybe your fellow friends as well. As a little side note, I want to talk about mental health quickly, as I did say that imposter syndrome has been linked with mental health issues. So the prevalence of depression is about 27.2% in medical students. And this is because medicine is challenging. It is a very competitive and demanding course. So it is understandable that sometimes mental health can suffer, but again, it is about finding that balance between your well-being and your work life. So it isn't uncommon to come across conditions such as anxiety and depression. And what's actually interesting is when starting university, the mental health of a medical student is actually similar to that of a non-medical student and the general public. But as their course progresses, their mental health tends to worsen. So it is important to understand that this may happen very slowly throughout your course, where you might not even realise that your mental health is deteriorating. So it is important to have sort of maybe days or just a five minutes every evening just to focus on your mental health and think, what have I achieved today? How do I feel? And just sort of basic things like that. So yeah, it is important to be aware of these disorders in yourself and in your friends as well. So just briefly, anxiety disorders, they are, it's a rational and physiological response caused by several different triggers that basically lead to excessive worry and fear that cannot be controlled. So it's really easy to feel overwhelmed by new situations and routines. And when you obviously move to university, you're in a completely different situation. You haven't got your family in the same area usually. And you obviously have a very different routine where you're having to do your own self-directed learning. So it's very different. So it may take a few months for you to adjust, but that's totally fine. Just try and focus on your well-being during those months and ensure that you are trying to learn how you can form a new routine for that environment. So some tips for anxiety. I've put here, create a routine that's work efficient but also not too crammed. So I find a routine is really helpful for anxiety, and it just seems to help me gain more control of it. And don't revise on bad days. This is probably my biggest tip, is not to revise on a bad day, because you're not going to revise efficiently. And you're not going to be able to retain the information that you're learning anyway. It's better just to say, okay, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to take today off and I'm going to pick up my book tomorrow. that will help you so much more than sitting there for 8 hours when you feel really terrible and revising for those 8 hours. And again, just don't be upset if you don't stick to your plan. Life happens and things happen that interfere, and if you get upset over them, there's nothing you can do about it. You just need to leave that and try your best the next day. Also, exercising and eating a healthy diet, which is what Nuria will be talking about shortly. This is really important, I think, just to make sure that you're getting all the right nutrients in your body and you are being healthy. And exercise is also a very good stress reliever. Also, I find working in a clean environment is a lot more helpful for my revision than anything else. So I feel like if I'm in a messy environment when I'm revising, that it's very distracting. This is actually maybe a reason why people prefer libraries, because obviously they're outside of their room and it's a clean environment. So for me personally, making sure that my room is clean is something that really helps. It's just a little thing sometimes that sort of help you. Just briefly, depressive disorders is this prolonged feeling of numbness and low mood, and it can affect people in multiple ways. So it may, so for some people it may be extremely difficult to get out of bed, for example, or to even move. And it is this overall dissatisfaction with life, which can be very distressing, and it can lead to feelings of guilt. You feel guilty that you feel this way about life when everyone seems to feel amazing about life. So it is distressing, and if you feel like any of your friends are experiencing this, please do talk to them, because it is very upsetting for that individual as well, not just for everyone else watching that individual. So some tips for low mood and even depression: try to watch some light-hearted shows. For example, I watch Friends, and that seems to always pick up my mood quite a lot. Self-care is really important for low mood. Just doing the little things like making yourself a cup of tea, getting showered, getting dressed. Just those little things really help you to carry on through the day, and you don't even need to revise or do anything on those bad days. But as long as you just make sure that you're looking after yourself, then you feel a lot better. And also, slightly reducing your hours of revision during these tough periods. And seeking help from tutors. So tutors, they can be really good people to talk to because they understand your course, they've been through it a lot of the time, and they can be really helpful. And also phoning friends and family. Now, you don't necessarily have to talk to these friends and families about your mental health, but just phoning them and listening to their stories can actually make you realise why, that you're happy there in your life. So it can bring back a bit of satisfaction. So how to get help? A few websites that I have put down that I find really helpful. So mind.org, this is a really good site for explaining any mental health condition. It really is, and it provides videos of people explaining them. So it's very holistic, and it's really good if you're just thinking, oh, I don't quite understand this, or I don't quite know how I would approach that. Use mind.org, it's really good. And Koof is really interesting. I think it's an app designed by students for students to provide mental health support and allow you to talk to others facing the same issues. So it's basically like an online network, like Facebook Messenger, but except you're specifically helping your own mental health. The NHS Mood self-assessment. This is nice if you're trying to request support without having to talk to someone directly on the phone, which can be a barrier if you're suffering from anxiety and depression. So that's nice to use. And also Silver Cloud is a really good app where you can undergo therapy like CBT, again, without needing face-to-face sessions with an actual person. And these are really good, both the Silver Cloud and the NHS Mood self-assessment. They're really good things to just initiate that sort of requesting support for your mental health. And then you can obviously have things like Samaritans where you call up. And also I think educating yourself on mental health conditions is really important, because when you do that, you start to understand them a bit better, and you can identify them even in other people as well, and maybe understand them rather than judge them. Also look at the wellbeing services or resources that your universities offer. I know Exeter is really good with their wellbeing services, so I'm not sure what other universities are like, but it's just about sometimes just looking, or maybe even just asking your tutor if they have any resources for you. Again, seek help and ask questions from your tutors. They are often really lovely and will help you. And don't ever believe that your mental health conditions will limit abilities as doctors. If anything, they can make you 10 times more passionate and dedicated. So even if you're just having some feelings of imposter syndrome, don't ever think that it's limiting your abilities. You've just got to do as best as you can. So next, Emily will be doing a chat on transitioning into the medical community. Please go follow SDocs. It is a really good page for loads of different lectures.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'd like to introduce Emily, another fantastic speaker from the University of Exeter, who will be going through transitioning into the medical community. And I'd like to remind everyone to like and subscribe to our Mass Academy YouTube channel, join our SDocs Facebook group, and join our SDocs Slack group to keep up to date with all of our content.
Okay, so hi there, I'm Emily Woodcraft, and I'm also a third-year medical student, and I'm just going to talk about the transition into the medical community as a whole. So I'll talk a little bit about transitioning into the kind of medical school side of things, so here it is, and then I'll also talk about the kind of clinical side of things, because they're quite a unique environments that you might not have previously had any kind of experience in. So yeah, starting off with the medical school environment, obviously the workload is heavy. There is a lot of content to learn in medicine. Like Amy was saying, you've got to really work out a nice kind of work-life balance. But I think my main advice for this, because obviously we can't reduce the amount of content that you need to learn, unfortunately, but the main kind of advice I have for you about that is setting realistic expectations for yourself and being flexible in how you work. So everybody works differently. Everyone has their own kind of way of learning. Are you a visual learner, etc. And I think for first year, you've got the time to try out different revision styles. So, maybe you like working with mind maps. And also there's the fact that I kind of split medicine into sort of three main areas. You've got the clinical side of things, so that's things on placement, working with patients, and then you've got anatomy, and then you've got biomed. And for example, when I do revision for clinical things, it's very different to how I revise for biomed and anatomy. So it's kind of working out what works best for you. Don't be afraid to try out something new, and also don't compare yourself to what others are doing. So for some people, working hours a day in the library, just going over notes all the time is helpful for them, and how they revise and how that works out for them. And that's great, but for some people that might not work out so well. So just kind of, again, with the imposter syndrome, don't be comparing yourself to how others are doing. Just give yourself the time to adjust and experiment with different styles and find out which ones work for you. And then also, I think another key thing about medical school is that you have a really big community of lecturers and teachers, tutors, etc., who want to help you. So don't be afraid to ask them for help, along with your peers in the medical school, so your classmates, your friends. Don't be afraid to stay after a lecture and just have a chat with the lecturer about maybe if there was something that you didn't understand so well, or even if you're just kind of interested in the topic. Teachers can really appreciate you being enthusiastic about their specialties. So don't be afraid to kind of, maybe in the environment of COVID, popping them an email would be the thing to do. But yeah, so ask for help. Generally, people that go into medicine do it because they want to help other people. So don't feel like you'll be a burden, or that you're, wasting their time, or that they won't want to answer your question, because they most likely just want to help, and everybody just wants you to succeed. So yeah, don't feel like you're being a burden or anything. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the student community. So I've got up here, I've got a few different societies. So as well as your medical student peers, there's also kind of wider societies in your medical school. So these are just ones I quickly found from looking at the Exeter one. So whatever you're interested in, it's important to have a life outside of medicine. Obviously, it's really important to put the hours in, put the time in, but at the end of the day, what will make you a good doctor is not just the academic side of things, but also how well-rounded of a person you are. And things like, you know, maybe if you're into knitting or you're into baking, being part of like society can really help you to take better care of yourself and be a good use of your free time to wind down and chill out between revision sessions. And then also there's the opportunity to, if you, for example, if there's a society that you really enjoy being a part of this year, in your first year, then maybe in your second year, you might decide to join the committee of it. So for example, I'm on the Wellbeing in Medicine committee, and I feel like the skills I've learned from being on the committee are really useful for kind of going off into medicine, skills related to networking, interpersonal skills and social skills and things like that. So just kind of don't feel like if you're not doing medicine stuff all the time that it's necessarily bad and won't help you to be a good doctor, because there are so many different skills that make you a good doctor. So yeah, and then the next slide. I'm not in control of my slides at the moment, so sorry for the delay. So yeah, so the next I'm just going to talk about placement. So I only do this quite briefly because I'm sure in first year you won't have as many placements, but there are some universities like Exeter, for example, where we do monthly placements, so you can be exposed to the clinical environment quite early on. But yeah, so I've just got a little word cloud here that has all of the, well, not all of them because there are many, but some of the different roles that people have within the multidisciplinary team. So the MDT, which I'm sure is a buzzword that you've heard from prepping for interviews. So really there is a massive team of people in medicine, and it's kind of all about working towards the same goal of helping out your patients. It might feel like the consultant is a bit daunting or kind of asking you too many questions, but at the end of the day, everybody wants to help each other out. So don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask if you can practice a certain clinical skill. If you're learning clinical skills in first year, things like taking histories, don't be afraid to ask if you could practice it, because the sooner you start practicing, the more experience you'll get, and the better you'll be when it comes to having proper placements and things in third year and onwards. But yeah, so be enthusiastic. Everybody on the team really is very likely to warm to you more if you are enthusiastic and interested. And then lastly, I just wanted to quickly talk about online medical communities. So there are loads of different spaces online for medical students. So from all the way at the bottom of the hierarchy, I've kind of got it in order of formality. We have things like memes, so pages where you can share different like kind of funny images and stuff with each other. And I think it can be really good to have these spaces so that you can kind of see that you're not in it on your own. So maybe if you kind of in your school are seeing that everybody around you is maybe kind of achieving really well, and that feeling of imposter syndrome where, you know, you're really struggling with a concept, for example in this one, if you're not understanding action potential and you think, oh, everybody else understands this, but I just can't wrap my head around it, and then the feelings of, you know, imposter syndrome kick in, and then you see something like that and you think, oh, you know, I'm not on my own. These can be kind of really helpful with those feelings of kind of lack of self-worth and things like that. But yeah, kind of moving up, there's Facebook groups and pages. So for example, the SDocs page, of course, is a good one to follow for that kind of feeling of community, as well as good resources for if you're actually learning or wanting to revise. And then there's Instagram pages. So my personal favorite is Medgemonics. So they just, they post kind of different mnemonics that help you remember different concepts in medicine, which I find really useful because I like having things dumbed down to simple kind of things like that, so I can help remember them. And then there's Med Twitter is a really good hashtag to follow. So it's a little, I've kind of said this a little bit more formal because there are people like consultants and other kind of medical students are generally on Twitter using this hashtag, and I think it's quite a good space to get your head into what is happening currently in medicine, so kind of what are the hot topics that consultants and doctors are talking about at the moment. So it can be really good to get involved with these spaces or just kind of have a read through, and it kind of pulls you away from the sort of pure academic side of things and back into like, oh, this is real, like this is people actually being helped by medicine, or kind of interesting, innovative, new things going on that can kind of really get you excited about medicine again and like motivate you to go back and revise different concepts. And then lastly, of course, is LinkedIn is kind of the most professional platform, but mainly you can just use it if you ever want to reach out to people for research or placement opportunities. So it's kind of always worth just having an account, even if you don't check it a lot. It's nice to just have that building up in the background. But yeah, that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening, and now we're going to hear from Nuria about nutrition and health.
That was great, Emily. Now I'm delighted to introduce Nuria, who will give you some great tips on nutrition and health during med school.
Hello everyone, my name is Nuria. I am also a third year medic at Exeter University, and I'm going to be talking to you about nutrition and health. So keeping your mind and your body healthy. First of all, congratulations on starting your course. It's such an interesting and rewarding course, and it will definitely keep you busy throughout the year. Like Amy and Emily have said, you will that there is a lot of content, you will have a lot of information to learn, but hopefully the tips and tricks that we give you today will help you throughout the year and also throughout the rest of your medical career. This year is likely to be a little bit different. Obviously, we've got COVID-19, so in terms of going out and socialising a lot at the beginning of the year, that will be a little different this year, but we wanted to give you some tips to maintain your health and well-being during what will be an odd year for all of us. Of course, keeping your mind and your body healthy do go hand in hand, as I will talk about in a bit, but I'm going to talk about nutrition, physical activity and mental well-being separately, and just give you a few suggestions because we're all individual and different things work for different people. So first of all, physical activity. Like I said, different things work for different people. Physical activity does not have to mean playing sport, going to the gym, running. It can just be going for a walk, whether as a revision break or just for some fresh air, and it can be really beneficial to get your body moving. There's a reason why I chose the words physical activity rather than exercise. I think the word exercise often has connotations with sort of doing a really intense workout. And the point I want to make here is if that's what you enjoy, then that's perfectly fine. And you can do that to stay healthy and get a rush of endorphins. But you can also just go for a leisurely walk with friends, and you're getting your body moving, you're getting some fresh air, and that can really help your body and your mind. Also, many universities will offer sports that you can do. Now you can, if you have a particular preference for sport, whether it be hockey, football, netball, rugby, you can train with the university several times a week. But if you want something that's a little bit more chilled out, especially because in medicine you can have more contact hours, then intramural sports are a great way to get some exercise in and also get to know people on your course. I personally did it in my first year of medicine. I played with the medics netball team, and it was just such a lovely way to socialize with people. And also we only trained once a week, so it was very easy to fit within my schedule. Another top tip for you: Borrow My Doggy is an amazing app. I actually this morning went and took a dog out for a walk by the beach. Basically, you sign up for the app and you pay a small fee. I think it's something like £12, and that covers your insurance. If anything, hopefully it won't, but if anything does go wrong. And then you can search through dog profiles and you can contact the owners and ask to take their dog for a walk. One of my housemates is doing it every Saturday morning, and she was saying this morning that it really gives her a reason to get up on a Saturday morning, and it's so good for her because she goes out and she gets some fresh air, and she also gets some miles of walking in as well. So that's something that I think, if you can, would be it'd be a really great way to get out and to walk, especially if, like me, while you're at uni, you miss your dog at home. So next I'm going to talk about nutrition. Now, this is something that has always interested me personally, but quite often in first year, nutrition isn't at the forefront of students' minds. The first few months, you'll most likely be juggling finances, your lectures, and spending time with new people, and that is completely fine. At the end of the day, what's most important is that when you're settling into university, you feel comfortable and you feel happy in your environment. Once you've settled in, you might want to start thinking, I mean, certainly when I was starting university, many people, especially when their student loans were coming in, were getting sort of takeaways and Dominoes. But after a while, when budgets start getting a little tighter, I've listed some tips here for cooking during first year, and I've also continued to use the course. So when you're cooking, you could cook double and then have some for lunch the next day. You could also meal prep. This is very useful for saving time and money, and something I often implement when I have a very busy revision schedule. I know it saved me a lot of time last year. What I mean by meal prep is, for example, on a Sunday afternoon, you could make, so I used to make peanut butter noodles or a stir fry, and I would make enough for about 4 portions, and I'd put them in the fridge and have them throughout the week. And I could just throw it in the microwave and it would be ready in 2 minutes. You can also make classic meals like your spag bowl, your chili con carne, or a curry, higher in fibre and vitamins and minerals by just adding a variety of veggies. So, for example, one of my flatmates in first year, when he made his bolognese, just used to put a can of tomatoes and, I don't know, a couple of carrots, and that was completely fine. But he was asking me how he could get more veg into his diet, and I said, well, why don't you add a few peppers or a few peas, whatever you have in the fridge, really, just to bulk it up a bit and also get those extra vitamins in. So he ended up doing that, and he thought it was actually quite tasty. So that's a little tip for you. And also, if your budget doesn't stretch to buying fresh veg, frozen veg is just as good, and it's often so much cheaper. I know I always buy frozen peas and frozen sweet corn for that reason. Also, great websites for recipes include BBC Good Food, that's a really good website, Bosch, and the Student Food Project, which I only found recently. And there are some really nice cooking recipes on there, and they also make recipes specifically that are cheaper to make because they appreciate students won't have a huge amount of money. Taking care of your mind. So I really wanted to talk about this last because it does encompass physical activity and nutrition as well. They definitely go hand in hand. And I last year did a little presentation for a group in uni on coping strategies. So I've basically taken a slide from the presentation I did last year and just wanted to talk through it a bit with you guys. So first of all, what can we do to cope with the environment in medicine. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing course, but sometimes the workload can be just a little bit overwhelming. So what can we do? First of all, getting a support network around you is really important. I was once speaking to a foundation doctor, and I said, what is your biggest tip for someone starting medicine? And she said, make sure you've got a support network and really establish it early on, and they will help you so much throughout medical school. Don't be afraid to talk to people if you are finding something quite overwhelming. I think definitely a couple of weeks into uni when I started, I was thinking, gosh, this is a lot of work. I'm not sure how I'm going to learn everything. And a few weeks after that, I was actually talking with a friend, and she said, goodness, you wouldn't believe how many people I've talked to who said exactly the same thing. And next, make sure you have a social and a personal life. Like Emily said, it's important to do things outside of medicine and outside of studying, and to take time for yourself. When I was researching for this presentation, I had a look at various studies. One study found that impaired social activity was linked to impaired psychological health. It's so important. So, and like Emily said, it's really easy to meet new people by joining societies, etc. Obviously, this year might be a little bit different, but I know a lot of societies are doing events online. So really get involved with them, and you might be able to meet some new people. Also, when I was looking into this, there was a difference between active and emotional coping strategies. So active coping strategies are problem solving, or reevaluating a situation if something doesn't quite go your way. Emotional coping strategies are becoming withdrawn from a situation, or just accepting something as your fault when it's not necessarily. And there was a study that found that emotional coping strategies predicted forthcoming mental health problems over active coping strategies. That's something slightly it's a slight tangent to this presentation, but you can find lots of things on coping strategies online, both active and emotional, and I really recommend having a look, 'cause it's actually very interesting. Also, exercise or physical activity, one or the other. Just 1 hour of exercise a week can prevent 12% of future cases of depression. And when I read that, I just thought it was very interesting, but also I was quite surprised by that, the fact that it's just 1 hour. And that could be just 1 hour on a Saturday, and then just starting off with 1 hour on a Saturday, and then you could increase that throughout the week as well if you wanted to, if you enjoyed it. Sleep is, I think, so underrated. It's so important. Sleep can affect the foods that you choose, your mood throughout the day. This particular study that I have on this slide found a relationship between less sleep and significant negative mood change. The recommended, everyone's individual, but the recommended is around 8 or 9 hours a night. In university, sometimes, I know, speaking from personal experience, that can be quite difficult to get, especially if you have several deadlines or exams coming up, but really making an effort to get those hours in can make a big difference. Mindfulness as well. Oxford Mindfulness Centre in 2016 showed that patients who engaged in therapy were 23% less likely to suffer an episode of relapse. Now, this study focused specifically on patients with mental health problems, but mindfulness can actually be beneficial to many people. Even you don't have to be sat there for 30 minutes in the morning or in the evening. You can just do 5 minutes at the beginning of the day, and it just it's very relaxing and it recenters you. And I have some friends who do it, and it just really prepares them for the day. The SMILE trial is one of my favourite trials I've ever read about, actually. It was a randomised control trial, and it was published in 2017. It was quite a small study, but it's one of the first in this field. There were 56 participants that completed a 12-week trial. So they were split in half, and one group were given a Mediterranean-style diet. So lots of fruits and veggies, a couple of portions of fish a week, and then foods with a lot of good fats like avocado, nuts, seeds. And then there was a control group that went to a couple of talking sessions a week. Now, with the group that had the Mediterranean diet for 12 weeks, sorry, I need to make one thing clear here. All the participants had mental health diagnoses. I think the majority of them had a diagnosis of depression. Now, by the end of the 12-week trial, those who had been on the Mediterranean diet, there was a 32.2% remission. And those in the control group, there was an 8% remission. So, like I said, this is quite a small study, but it really, I think, demonstrates so clearly the impact that a good diet can have on mood. And then the last one I have listed here, micro stressors. So I found this one quite interesting. I listened to it on a podcast. I believe it was with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. And he was talking about micro stressors in the morning when he wakes up. So, for example, you get up and there is something on the floor and you trip over it, and then I don't know, you go down to the kitchen to make your breakfast and there's a cup that's been left out on the side, and it's something that you don't necessarily realize will annoy you. And he was saying that you can sort of spot these 6 or 7 micro stresses throughout the morning, and by the time you leave the house to go to work or to go to uni, you can just be in a bit of a bad mood. So he said things like preparing your clothes the night before, like Amy was saying, having a clean working environment and a tidy working environment. It can make a huge difference. And before that podcast, I hadn't actually realised how much of a difference that could make. So thank you so much for listening to us talk today. I really hope that's been helpful for you guys. Good luck with your course. Medicine is really amazing, and please subscribe to SDocs on YouTube and follow their Facebook page. They have some amazing resources. And if you have any questions, direct them to Amy. Her email is on the screen. Bye, guys.
Now that Nura has given us so much information, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Jared, who will be telling us about managing our finances during medical school. And remember to like and subscribe to the Meds Academy YouTube channel, join our Facebook page, and join our S.Slack channel to keep up to date with all of our content.
Hi guys, welcome to my talk today about managing finances. I hope you're enjoying the day and you found it useful so far. The aim of my talk today is to help you understand and organise your personal finances so that you can make the most out of med school. And in my talk today, I will be extending several invitations for little tasks that you can do to help you be more comfortable managing your finances. And I found them helpful myself, which is why I'm sharing. Now, I'm sorry to say this is not a get-rich-quick talk. You won't be lying in piles of money by the end of it or retiring at 30. However, the principles that we talk about today are things that can help you in med school and can take some of the pressure off your finances. Now, med school should be a time for us to enjoy as much as work hard. It's essential for us all to find time to relax and do the things that we enjoy. And that's the aim of the talk. Quick disclaimer, this talk is based on my personal experience. I'm not a financial advisor. It's important for you to do your own research for any financial decisions that you do make. So first of all, being concerned about finance is important. And there's this unspoken rule among doctors that we don't talk about money. And I think it's really unhealthy. It really dates back to when we're applying to med school. You know, the worst thing to say in an interview is you want to be a doctor so you can have a safe, steady income. And you've probably had people come up to you and say, oh, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be rich. Sadly, that is not the case. And it's really important for us to talk about it so that we can protect ourselves and our future families against financial difficulty. As well as this, we talk a lot about mental and physical well-being, but we very rarely talk about financial health. And financial health really can influence our physical and mental health, so it's an important thing to talk about. And the big question today is, what do you want out of your time at university? Do you want to travel? Do you want a car for your placements? Do you want to live with friends or live alone? Do you want to be involved with societies and research that can take a lot of time? Do you want to intercalate? Do you want to go on an elective abroad? And these are all things you need to be considering, and the earlier you consider them, the better. And today we're going to look at 3 steps that help us to live happily in university and to have the money to do what we want to do. Number 1, begin with the end in mind. So we're going to make a plan of the whole of med school, the end being graduation. Secondly, we're going to look at long-term planning to help you in the short term. And this is something you can apply whether you're a first or a 5th year, it can still help you. And finally, a few tips and tricks that I've found have helped me to enjoy my time at university. So step 1, along with invitation number 1. Whatever stage you're at in this process, you can take hold of your finances. And the first thing to do is to make a long-term plan of med school. I'm a huge advocate for planning and goal setting. And the further in advance that you can plan things, the better. Combine that with appropriate goal setting, and those skills can be applied in every aspect of life. Now, I understand things can change, and they do change. If I move this down here. But that's just part of the process. So the first thing you need to do is to lay out your income for each year. Things like your student finance, your NHS bursary, a parent's going to help, and any other bursaries that you might be eligible for. Then you need to look at outgoings, rent, intercalation. Do you want to travel? Do you want to go on an elective? And do you want a car? Now these things not only need to be planned as to if you want to do them, you also need to think about when you want to do them. And as you do this, you can sort of set out your income and outgoings each year and calculate any large gaps that need filling. It's simple stuff, but it does make a huge difference. So we're going to have a little bit of an aside now and talk about student finance and the NHS bursary. And that's because I think that they're really poorly understood topics. Now, we'll talk about the student finance in a minute, but those are some numbers that I'm sure you're all quite familiar with. The NHS bursary is essentially free money. And I've heard a lot of people give the funding system a lot of stick because you can't live off it. But at the end of the day, it is free money. The NHS have no obligation to pay for your tuition and your living expenses. They're literally giving us a minimum of £10,000 gift. So you get your tuition fees covered up to an undergraduate tuition fee. And then you get £1,000 non-mean tested bursary. You get a couple of thousand more based on your family income, whether you live in London and whether you're living at home or not. A few other things, you can apply for a top-up maintenance loan from Student Finance England, and you can get £84 a week if your course is more than 30 weeks. You need to apply separately for that. On top of that, you can get help with childcare costs. You can get a disabled student's allowance. They also help with travel costs for elective and placements. And these things are all worth reading up about in advance. So the NHS bursary, what, when, how? It's paid for all years past 4th year. So if you're an undergraduate student, you're looking at it being paid 5th and 6th years if you've intercalated. And in those years, as I said, you can get a loan from Student Finance England, but be aware that they are a lot less than the loans you've been getting previously. And so they're not quite as easy to live off. In your final year, it's even less, so just be aware of that. And they do count for intercalation. It's always worth asking your university in advance to make sure that you can use the NHS bursary on whatever course you're trying to intercalate on. But I haven't come across one they don't count for yet. Now, this is my personal example. I'm doing an MRes this year, so a Master's in Research. That course costs £11,000. The NHS bursary will only cover up to an undergraduate tuition fee, so that's £9,250, leaving £1,750 to pay. I chose to save up and to pay for that myself, rather than get a postgraduate loan for reasons that I will talk about now in a second, actually, because we need to cover graduate entry, which is a bit different. So if you're a graduate student and you're doing a graduate degree of 4 years, in your first year, you need to find £3,500 to pay for your tuition. and the rest of it is covered by the Student Finance England loans, including the maintenance loan. After that, the NHS will pay £3,715 of your tuition, and they will give you a bursary. You can top that up with student loans for both the tuition fees and the maintenance. So essentially, you need to find some cash to pay for the first year, and after that, you're covered, but you will be getting higher loans. And that moves us on to student loans. Now, this is just a big number to scare you all. And this is the approximate cost of med school for a student in London who has integrated with a master's. So it's a big amount of money, and that's why you've got to think about it. But don't panic just yet. Let's lay out some basic points about student loans. You start being charged interest as soon as you graduate. So when you graduate, you get a letter. It will say, "Thanks for joining the NHS and choosing to serve the people of Great Britain for your whole life. You owe us £70,000. Now, that's not word for word, but you get the idea. And at that point, the interest starts. Current interest rates are at 5.4%, which is 3% higher than the inflation rate. And that can change over time, but this is the real sucker punch, in that every year your student loan gets bigger every year you're out of university because of the interest. So, for example, if you came up with £70,000 of debt, your first year interest alone would be £3,780. And that just goes up because of compound interest. The second point that's important to understand is that it's written off after 30 years. And finally, you only pay 9% of everything you earn over £26,575 for undergraduate loans and 6% for postgraduate loans. If you have both, you pay 15%. The reason I chose to avoid a postgraduate loan is I didn't want to pay 15%. On top of that, postgraduate loans for intercalation tend to be quite low figures, and they get pushed up quite quickly by the interest rate. And because they're low originally, you'll probably pay them off, but you'll be paying a lot more than you borrowed in the first place because of the interest. So with all of these figures in mind, the question is, can the average doctor pay it off? And the answer is a lot more complicated than the question, and it very much depends on what you borrowed. Now, here's invitation number 2. This is a simple thing that you can do to figure out what's the best way to go about your student debt. The reason I brought it up is because it is a big amount of money and it is important. You've probably heard a lot of people talk about that it's not really worth worrying about it and you'll never pay it off anyway, so just forget about it. And that is partly true. It's estimated that 87% of students will never pay it back, but that means that 13% will. And doctors do tend to be on the higher end of earnings over the course of a career. So you do need to think about if you'll ever pay it back. So step number 1, it all might take a bit of time, but it is worth it. Step number 1, calculate how much debt you're going to be in at the end of uni. Number 2, figure out if you're ever going to pay it off. Now, you can do that in a spreadsheet. You can get the NHS wage structure. You can get your debt with a yearly increase on the interest, and you can figure out if you're ever going to pay it off. Now, it does take a little bit of time, but it is worthwhile. And the final thing that you need to start thinking about is it worth trying to pay it off early or not? And quite frankly, it depends on your situation. And if you've borrowed the lower amounts, it may be worth it. But don't rush into this. It's a long-term decision. And if you get it wrong, you can end up paying a lot more than you ever needed to. So speak through it with a financial advisor about your personal circumstances and see what they say. When I did my spreadsheet, it was only worthwhile if you're able to pay it off within 6 years of graduating. And that's obviously quite a lot of money per year, depending on how much you've borrowed. Now, if you're never going to pay it off, and there's no hope of that, then see it as a student tax. Just forget about it. Just think that you're being taxed 9% more than everyone else, and that's what you've paid for going to university. And you might pay a little bit more than you borrowed, but it's not going to break the bank. Now, these are very rough guidelines. I would encourage you to do a bit of reading around it as well, but this is the general idea. So we're going to move on now to number 2, long-term planning for short-term comfort. And this is another invitation for you to all try. And budget's really the word. I hate budgeting, I'll be honest with you, but I can promise you that if you have a basic budget, it will reduce your stress and open up so many opportunities. And the best way I've found to do it is to plan for a year at a time. So you start by writing in your income and when, so any loans, when they're coming in, any grants and when they're coming in, and so forth. Then you look at your outgoings, and again, when. You've probably recognised the pattern by now. But if you can put them on a timeline, then it makes it far easier to see if you can afford whatever you want to do that year. On top of that, you need to split them into essential and non-essential. Essential being things like rent, non-essential being things like a coffee on the way to lectures. And finally, break them down into weekly and monthly goals. Now, be realistic. Don't say you'll spend £15 on a week of groceries if you know that's never going to happen. And also set aside some money for leisure. You need to plan in your hobbies and the things that you enjoy doing as well. And this is what it might look like at the end. This is my 19 years, 2019 to 2020, budget sheet with all of the end of year stuff taken off, just to show you a kind of overview of what it might look like. And it doesn't take too long, but it does make a huge difference. So that's the second step. The final thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is just a few simple ways to make life easier for yourself. Now, let's keep this simple. All we really need is an income that is higher than our outgoings, and whether that's through student finance loans or a job. And in order to make us even more comfortable, we just need to decrease the outgoings and increase the income. And there are so many ways that you can tweak things to make it easy for yourself. And as soon as your income is better than your outgoings, then you're good to go. So here are my 5 top tips for reducing your outgoings. So you've done your budgeting, you've planned your major outgoings, but you're still a bit short, or you want to save a bit more. What you can do first of all is track what you spend in the average week, and there are so many apps that will do this for you. Starling Bank have a fantastic service. It's all online, and they help you track exactly what you're spending your money on, and look at where you can save when you've done that. A few other tips that I find really helpful. Number 1 is to switch. Mobile, electricity, gas, car insurance. If you switch or threaten to switch, you will get better prices. The other week, I knocked £8 off my monthly phone bill and doubled my data. I also knocked £500 off my car insurance. £500 would take me many, many hours of minimum wage working to get that amount of money. It's a far more effective use of time to save money that is as simple as a phone call. So take an evening, write down everything you pay for monthly and everything you pay for yearly, and just call around and see what you can get cheaper. Number 2, understand the tenancy deposit scheme. This is a government scheme that protects your deposit. When you go into a house and when you leave a house, take lots of photos, lots of videos. If you are to break anything during your tenancy, fix it, because you're always going to be able to do it cheaper than the landlord is going to find someone to fix it, and it will cost you a lot more money. If you're clever about it, you can keep your deposit through the whole of med school, because every time you move, you'll get all of it back, and you just use it for the next house. Number 3, learn to cook. It's enjoyable as much as anything. I love cooking, and I've learned how to make a cracking KFC during lockdown as well. Learn how to cook your favourite takeaways, and your friends will love you as well, and it will save you a lot of money. Number 4, cashback and plugins. Now, there's loads of cashback sites. Just have a little Google and find one that works for you. But if you're going to be spending money on things, you might as well get a couple of % back. And also, you can get plugins that are automatically on your browser, and they find discount vouchers when you check out on various websites, and you can save a lot of money doing that over the course of a year. Finally, my personal favourite, along with switching, is go on to comparethemarket.com, buy a £2 travel insurance, and then get 2 for 1 cinema tickets for a year. If you go to the cinema once in a year, you've already made your money back. So there's 5 tips for you. Now let's look at increasing our income. And we're going to talk about doing this in 2 ways. The first one are in lump sums. So this is where you get given money once. Examples of this are grants, bursaries, and competitions. The way that I like to search is to look at my university first of all, then look at national big organisations, things like the BMJ, the Royal Colleges and the Royal Societies, and then look at interests that you have. So if you're interested in haematology, look at some haematology organisations or journals and see what competitions they've got going on. And also, if you're doing any research, look around and see if you can squeeze it in to any competitions. If you've done the hard work of the research, you might as well use it and try and make something out of it. It'll be good for your CV and for your wallet. As well as this, electives have a huge number of bursaries, and some will even pay in full if you're not too fussy about what you do. And these kind of grants and bursaries for all of these different areas don't have that many applications sometimes. So a few hours of searching can actually bring back a very good return. I've also put clinical trials on the bottom of this. Now, that may be a little bit controversial, and I don't advocate selling your health for some money. However, I've found them a really great way of making some cash. Always research the trials really well. And as med students, we're somewhat privileged in that we understand the jargon in the documents that they hand out, and therefore we're able to make a better judgment of the risks involved. Don't risk your health, it's not worth it, but it is a good way of making some money. Finally, we're going to talk about cash flow. Now, cash flow is really important. No matter how good your budgeting is, there will be unexpected costs. And it's important to have some form of cash flow for safety and for saving. In my opinion, it's always good to have 2 or more different streams of cash flow. So if one disappears, the other can keep you going. And the most obvious form is a part-time job. Now, you can look at being employed and self-employed. Employed, obviously, you're going to have regular hours. It's a more stable income. Self-employed, the hourly rate is better and it's more flexible. So you need to decide what's best for you. But there are so many jobs you can do in med school. And as a med student, you will be respected just for being there. You've got A's in your A-levels. At the very minimum, you can do tutoring for A-level students. Holiday work is really important and it's great. You can make a big lump of cash by working hard for a few weeks in the summer, and that can help you going for the year, keep you going for the year. As well as that, online work is fantastic. Obviously, it's kind of the way of the world at the moment, but if you can work online, you save time and travel expenses. So finding ways to work online is good. And finally, the gold standard really of cash flow is passive income. And passive is a huge misnomer. It takes a lot of time and effort for any of these things to bear fruit. However, when they do, you can stop trading your time for money. And as you do that, you free yourself up more financially. So if you have any hobbies, anything that you want to write a blog about, try and monetize it. If you're interested in any of things, a simple Google will bring up lots and lots of information. So finally, a quick overview for you all. A good plan of med school with your income and outgoings. A good yearly plan and breaking that down into a weekly budget. And finally, a few tips and tricks to decrease your outgoings and increase your income. And again, this is all to help you have the best time that you can in university. So decide what's important for you and plan accordingly. Here are some useful sites that have some great discounts and information about finance. If you're really in financial difficulty, the Royal Benevolent Fund has great resources and help for medical students. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the talk. This is my Twitter handle. If you ever want to drop me a message, feel free.
Thank you so much to Amy, Emily, Neri, and Jared for all of your hard work. And remember to join our S.Dots Facebook group, our S.Dots Slack group, and like and subscribe to the Men's Academy YouTube channel to keep up to date with all of our content, including S.Dots Eamon episode 5. Look, listen, live. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.